Welcome to the Disney Parks Podcast, your Disney infotainment podcast. Keep your hands, arms, feet, and legs inside the podcast at all times and get ready for the Disney Parks Podcast.
All right. Welcome, everybody. We have a fantastic show. We have two awesome gentlemen who wrote a book called How Does, if I can say it, How Disney Does That, if I could speak tonight. Wow, that's bad. We have James Warda, who's the president and author of Where Are We Going So Fast? He writes for the Chicago Tribune, Pioneer Press, Chicken Soup for the Soul. He has worked also. His work has also been featured in Celebration Magazine, good Disney magazine, Disney Magazine, WDW Magazine, and Disney for Dads. And I think I've spoken to the guys at Disney for Dads a long time ago. Theron Skees, if I'm saying that correctly. I hope so.
That's right. Yep, you got it.
The primary contributor is the seasoned Walt Disney Imagineering. He worked for WDI, creative executive with over 23 years experience at WDI. He is an experienced designer and the founder of the Designers Creative Studio. Additionally, he served as a guest educator, lecturer at institutions such as Savannah College of Art, Design of University of Central Florida, and Ringling College. That sounds interesting. And Indiana University, Purdue of Indianapolis. Whew, that's a mouthful.
You could say IUPUI.
That would have been easier. I went to college with some people that came from IUP, so I should have probably known that, but I didn't. But hey, guys, welcome to the show. I am intrigued to have you both, talk about this book. But the first question we love to ask everybody is, how did your journey with Disney begin? So, anybody want to start?
Well, I'll just start, and I'll say the name of the book is actually "How Does Disney Do That?"
Okay, that's good.
And just thought you might want me to to jump in there, but I'll since I often always go first answering questions, Theron, why don't I'll give this one to you.
Yeah, sure. You actually faded out a little bit on when you asked the question. So I think you were asking how we met, how we started at Disney, that kind of thing.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Excellent. Well, sure, I'll kick it off, James. Let's see. I had just, I believe, gotten laid off from Disney. It was around the pandemic time. And spending a bit of time on social media, talking to students who were graduating in themed entertainment design programs into an industry that, in a sense, was shut down. So there was quite a lot of. I felt like I was doing a lot of work within our community of people to really, keep the encouragement high, and that the industry was coming back and everything. And it was about that time that James reached out to me on social media. I believe it was LinkedIn, and we just started up a great conversation. And as great conversations go, it really just blossomed into this really great friendship. And I don't remember, one of us said, boy, we should probably write all this down. So we just started recording all of our sessions, and James really landed on this idea to create a book about this. And what I discovered at the time, and James would definitely tell you this story, was that he had an experience at Disney on an attraction that was a really emotional connection that he made. And what we discovered is that he was questing for, how does Disney do that? Make him feel that way, make fans feel that way. Right. And I think he was surprised to find out that I was asking a question as well. But I'll come back to that after James talks about the emotional connection that he made. I think the way you tell it, James, is fantastic. So you should do it.
Thanks, Theron. So you had asked also, Tony, about, so as a kid, I grew up, with the typical stuff with Disney, watching Sunday night TV. And, so I really liked, as I say in the book, I really liked Disney. As a kid, I didn't love Disney because we didn't go to Disney World. And, that kind of thing. But I really liked Disney. But then my wife started, when I got married, my wife started planning trips down to Disney World, and I just fell in love with Disney. I say you don't know when it actually happens. You never know when you actually fall in love, but you know when you're in love.
Right.
So we were living up in Illinois, and our middle son had moved down to Orlando, and so mid-pandemic, we hadn't seen him for a year, and he calls me and he says, Mom, you and Mom have to come down and go on Rise of the Resistance and Flight of Passage, these two new rides. And then he said something that really, I believe, really changed the game, because he said, don't watch any video. Don't watch anything. Don't read anything about it. I think if he hadn't said that, we might not be here talking right now, because it was a very important element of what happened. So we came down and we went on Rise of the Resistance, and it just, it truly is an experience. That is really an experience. And then we went on Flight of Passage, and I wasn't emotionally connected to Avatar.
Right.
It was a cool movie, but I wasn't, deeply, I wasn't one of those people who were, wanted to live on Pandora. And so, we got in the queue, which was amazingly detailed.
Yeah.
And my son and I were on the ride, and that wall went up, and we flew down into Pandora. And every time I tell the story, I get goosebumps. I'm getting goosebumps right now. I kid you not. Every time I've told this story over the last 3 years, and I'm not making that up. And we flew into Pandora, and I looked around, and I started to tear up at one point. And I'm like, I'm a 57-year-old man crying on a Disney ride. What is happening? And then I realized that I was feeling a sense of wonder. And I'm like, when do we get, as adults, when do we get to feel wonder? It's when our kids are born, when we get married, that kind of thing. So I got off the ride, and I remember I walked out of the building, and I asked myself, how does Disney do that? And I knew when I was asking that question, I wasn't asking so much what's the actual method, like what kind of rock work did they do, and what kind of machine that was important, but that wasn't what I was asking. It was, how did somebody on the other end of this thing create this thing that I went on and turned me into a 5-year-old?
Right.
And so I, after that, I wrote about it. I was writing for the Chicago Tribune at the time, and I got back, a lot of replies, over 100 or so right away, from men and women saying they'd cried on Disney rides. Like, okay, interesting. And then a few weeks later, I watched The Imagineering Story by Leslie Iwerks on Disney Plus, and
great movie.
And I saw Imagineers tearing up, crying about, not bawling, but getting emotional about the attractions they worked on. It's like, okay. And then I was on LinkedIn. I do not get a commission from LinkedIn for this, just so you know. And I saw a post from the Disney Institute about the Disney Springs transformation. Right. And there was a video with Theron in it, describing, because he oversaw the entire transformation. Right. And he, I'm a communications PR person. That's my background. So when I saw him in the video, I'm like, oh, this guy's good. He's good. He can tell a story. He's, plus this is a really cool story. Sure. So I just put out a comment on there, and then he commented back to me, and we messaged, and I've still got the actual messages where he says, hey, do you want to collaborate? Right. And it's like, okay. I look at Imagineers like Bruce Springsteen, like they're rock stars to me, yeah. So Theron is actually like a rock star. So here's a rock star asking me if I want to, I am a musician too. It's like, hey, do you want to jam? It's like, darn right. Yeah. And then, like Theron was saying, I find out that as an Imagineer, he always had the question, how did the attraction make you feel? And my question was, how did Disney make me feel that way? It's right. So we launched 2 groups, yep. Facebook and LinkedIn, and they're growing very quickly now. And this conversation, and Theron actually, I think Theron was the one who really mentioned. I'll let him talk more about it,
Mhm.
but he really mentioned how let's this is a conversation between a fan and the person who designs the experience for them, but let's invite everybody into this conversation.
Right.
So I'll hand it back to Theron for that part of it.
Yeah, but it's so great to actually have a book that represents that conversation. Of all the books that have been written, and there's a lot of them, because the Disney experience is an important part of the of the world. I believe it's an important place to meet and to escape and to play, and so to represent this conversation between experienced creators, so the people behind the scenes, the Imagineers, former Imagineers, retired Imagineers, and guests, fans of these experiences, we believe that it's a really important conversation you can take into your everyday life as well. So we think we just tried to really put that in the book and keep the conversation going, so to speak. And James interviewed so many different people from the industry and included that in the book, as well as fans. So I don't know. We were just really happy to see the reaction of people, to that conversation.
Right. Yeah. So, what was the process of like getting to the industry people and then doing that research, like, and then pulling the string on the fans, right? Because you talk to one fan, and then, probably this fan says, "Hey, you should talk to this guy," and then talk to, and I'm sure it's like just pulling a string, and then it's a cascading effect of what do we do with all this, these interviews now. So, how did that whole process work for you guys, and how did you sort it all out?
Yeah, I think it's kind of like a Disney pinata because
Mm.
it's like I would love to say that I planned it,
Right.
but I didn't plan it. I just knew I had a vision for
Yeah.
what this could be, and then Theron became, we had this vision together, and I just started talking to people.
Yeah.
Every person I would talk to had somebody else for me to talk to.
Right.
Every person I would talk to was so generous with their time,
Hmm.
and you know, truly amazing. I mean, once you start meeting Disney people, they're there. And so what I did know is I wanted some balance to it. So I wanted fans to be included.
Hmm.
Industry people much easier. Here's the thing. I'll tell you, this project would not. I'm just going to put it out there. This project wouldn't have worked if I hadn't met Theron,
Hmm.
because Theron was, you can close your ears, Theron, because he's very humble. So he's not going to want to hear all this part. You can edit this just for me. But Theron was the perfect partner because he's got a great name in the industry,
Hmm.
great reputation.
Right.
When I would talk to anybody, I'd mention Theron. It's like, oh yeah, think the world of him.
Right.
Really experienced, great expertise. So I feel like after 3 years of talking with him, I've gone through a master class of experience. I'm actually designing my first theme park next week, so I'll let you know how that goes. But
In the backyard,
yeah,
old Disney style.
it'll only be 2 feet by 2 feet, but it's amazing. Um, so I think and you know what the that's going to keep coming up, Tony, throughout this podcast is coincidence.
Yeah.
I'm a huge believer that coincidence is not coincidence. That I try to always follow coincidences,
Right.
and everybody has connected me to everybody, and so then it's like once you have that, what's the word? I can't think of the word. You have enough momentum, enough mass moving forward,
Right.
it starts to move on its own,
Yep.
so that I can. Not everybody. I mean, I'm not Superman, but I'm just saying there's enough mass now where I can, and Theron has a huge network. And we're about to go to, IAPA this week, and he's literally, they're probably going to bring him in on like one of those thrones, So,
No, definitely not. I can say, Tony, from my perspective, what was interesting is when you're behind the scenes, you're the individual behind the curtain, so to speak. I
Right.
think in a sense you get a little bit. I hate to use the word jaded because it sounds so negative, and it's not that. It's just you've seen a lot, and you know how things come together. And when James and I were talking about this, that this conversation, I really had a sense that the fans were really going to love it, and that when you ask fans of Disney experiences to share their stories, I mean, you're definitely going to get some really great stories because
Yeah.
people connect emotionally with it. I wasn't sure that the community of dreamers and builders of these experiences
Mhm.
would have the time, one, or would really be interested in sharing at the level that they have shared. And I think that's one thing that surprised this old dog, was that how many people in our community came out from on that side of the line, if you will, and really shared. And it was just amazing to see. That, I think, is what really made the book a real conversation between those two groups.
Right. So, like, James had the experience on Pandora. So how, it's story driven, but how do you make sure there is that emotion to the attraction, right? Because you guys don't, Disney's very secretive. They don't. Oh, let's show this to a test audience and see how they do that. So how do you know, like, what's the process, I guess, they go through to make sure that the story is good enough to make that emotion connection? Like, oh, people are gonna love this because of the emotional connection to it, or the attachment to this story, or the attachment to these characters. What's the secret sauce? Do you want to spill the beans? No.
Oh yeah, sure. Well, we talked. I mean, James and I talked 100 hours or more on video about that. By the way, those are under lock and key, right? But call it research, right, James?
Yeah.
I would say, this is big business. I mean, to be honest with you, that's literally what I do in my company, is help other companies, other brands, um, touch their customers in a deeply emotionally connecting way
Hmm.
to their brand. That's kind of what I do. That's what I realized after all that time at Disney. That's what I realized. That's what I do.
Right.
And so when you're telling a story, what's interesting is our brains are already wired to categorize memories in a story format.
Okay.
So as human beings, we're wired that way. So when you're watching a film, you're reading a book, you're playing a game, you're in a theater, you're in a theme park, those stories, those experiences unfold in the framework of the story, which our mind wants to understand and take on.
Right.
And those stories are very carefully told in a way that the visitor, that the guest, is invited to participate. So all of the other forms of storytelling I just mentioned, movie, TV, streaming,
Hmm.
games, theater, there's a fourth wall. There's a distinct separation between the performance
Right.
and the audience, but not in a theme park. In a theme park, it's really one of the only venues that invites you to be the hero in the story.
Right.
So you are, wading, swimming, and diving. Those are the three levels of experience into a story. Some people just enjoy it. They have fun. They have a hot dog. They, have a meal and they go home. Those are the waders. The swimmers, they dig deeper. They know the names of some characters. They might know names of places. They might know, a song from a film or from a certain other IP. And then, of course, the divers, they are into the story. They have the clothes. They have the lightsabers. They wish they could shoot webs out of their hands like Spider-Man. I mean, they're into it.
Right.
And that's what we build experiences for. So I don't know. That's a long answer for a short question, but I hope that
No.
helped you get there.
No, because I feel like something like Rise of the Resistance, you're living, right? You're living your Star Wars adventure. You're not
Right.
watching or viewing this now. You are in the story. You are part of this story that is unfolding in front of you, and then
That's right.
you take it off on the machine and whisked away into Star Wars.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, because when you're in the theater, and I know there's 4D, 5D, 8D, 10D, 100D, whatever theaters, shake and bake and spritz water on you. But, you typically don't, taste,
Yeah.
smell, touch. And you can't really do that in a book. It explains it to you. And maybe in a theater you can get that. But in a theme park, you're truly immersed in an environment. And that environment's filled with characters and all of that happens at a time, right? And you really are moving in rhythm with a 360-degree story, and it's fascinating. And frankly, it's from a creative perspective, it's the only thing that satisfies anymore. I worked in film, I've written, now a book and everything, and it just nothing satisfies like creating a spatial environment where people are, completely convinced that it's real.
Right. Right. And I feel like in a theme park, you know, you can't see out, so the outside world is not visible from inside any Disney theme park.
That's
So
right.
you're in it, right? You have no choice really but to be in it. But you can choose not to. We have cell phones now. You can, look
Right.
outside the wall if you want, but outside the berm. In the book too, you talked about method and magic. What can you elaborate on that like a little bit more? What does that mean, method and magic?
Yeah, I think it dovetails nicely to what Theron was just saying, because I think Theron was he was talking a lot about the method for doing these things, and going to be, I don't know if you've talked to Lee Cockrell at all. He was the former EVP of Disney World.
Yep.
He always says that the magic comes from the people,
Mm-hmm.
that, and so for me, really, if you remember when I said, how does Disney do that? I'll give you an example. If I look at Theron, what he does, right? And all this great design and experience, but I believe the fuel that drives all that, and I know I'm right, is the passion he has.
Mm,
He wants to create feelings in people
right.
through worlds. I mean, Theron, am I being?
Absolutely. I mean, this could not be created by, as much as I think that there's proponents about for what I'm about to say is, but I don't think this could be created by artificial intelligence, right? It is a human being that understands what an environment, a story, and an experience for human beings needs to be, right? And when you look at a place like Disney, and you ask yourself the marketing question, who's the demographic for Disney?
Right.
Well, that really, it's 4 to 94, right? It's everybody,
Yeah.
every gender, every culture, every race, every language, and that's the way Walt wanted it. Well, who do you need to create environments for that broad of an audience? Well, your creators all need to look like
Right.
that total audience, right? And so I
Yeah.
think that's what really makes it fun, is that the you could create the greatest environment, but if you don't fill it with cast members who understand their role and communicate that story to guests, it's kind of just this static environment in a sense, So I think there's a brilliant interplay between placemaking and performance in a sense, bringing the space alive.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you think is the how does Disney have such a profound, emotional impact on like you're saying the 4 to the 94? How does that, because what would be emotional for a 4-year-old is probably not the same as a 94-year-old person. So, you know, I guess everybody comes off has some kind of connection, but maybe for a 4-year-old it's a little bit different than the 94-year-old. For me, when I take my kids, I live through their emotion, right? They're having a great time, they're enjoying this. So for me, the emotional connection is, through my kids or my grandkids. Well, my kids are adults,
Right.
but through my grandkids. Uh, so how does Disney do something like that? How do you make the connection to such a spread of 4 to 94?
Absolutely. Well, the idea of a a family, right, from the 50s when Walt opened, a family looks different than it does today, right? You have a lot of multi-generational families where you have grandparents, parents, and children,
Mhm.
and having that broad of a spread. Oftentimes, with those older adults, the grandparents certainly, and in often cases the parents, you have a lot of nostalgia going on because of I mean, Disney's a legacy brand, Universal, same thing, right? But
Yeah.
those are legacy brands, and you have people who have visited and fallen in love there. They've gotten engaged there. They've built so many great memories, and now they want to vicariously experience that, as you said, Tony, through your kids and through your grandkids. So, from a creator's perspective, you Disney has to keep a very careful balance, not to get rid of all of the nostalgia, because that happens to feed that emotional connection that adults have already had with
Mhm.
the product, with the IP. But then you have to keep up with the younger generation and the new IP and new stories being told. And believe it or not, there's a bit of a boomerang effect that happens. As much as the adults are nostalgically feel like they're introducing their children and grandchildren to this experience, the children and grandchildren are also introducing the grandparents and parents to IP that the kids are now connected to. And you have this really great coming together, this mosaic that of experience. And that's why, believe it or not, there are restaurants and parks and places to sit, is because what we know from when we create experiences is that people need to sit and talk about those experiences, because that locks the experience in. It becomes, as they say in the industry, sticky, right? It
Mhm.
sticks to us.
Yeah.
And can you believe that? I can't believe. Did you see? Yeah, I can't believe that. Grandma and grandpa may not want to go on Space Mountain. It's too intense. So maybe the parents and the grandkids go, and they come out, and the grandparents are remembering how great it was, so you still have something to talk about. And I think that's that interplay that brings the family together, that brings people together, that seeking for unification with a branded storytelling experience in the middle. That's what it's really all about.
Yeah. Yeah. James, you spoke about your Disney memory that kind of brought you to tears. Theron, do you have an experience that memory that is profound for you that maybe didn't bring you to tear, but was an emotional connection for you?
Yeah, a lot actually.
Yeah.
I mentioned before that you tend to kind of be jaded, and I don't mean that I don't want to build a picture for your audience that there's, Imagineers are just yawning at these amazing magical things, because it's not true.
Right.
You're touched by them, they're emotional, but because and I think audiences in general are quite sophisticated and know a lot. I mean, every Blu-ray that you buy has got hours of content that tells you how they made it. So to bring an adult to genuine moment of awe and wonder in their life, for people who create that's really challenging. So as context, I think the moments that I have that were really amazing Disney moments. One that I'll bring up, that doesn't involve my family, because there's quite a lot of that. But I was on a business trip in Anaheim, and we were working. I mean, it was evening. We had worked all day. It was really long. It was that evening time when the fireworks were going to happen, and we had to get to another office. So the quickest way to do that, I don't know if many of your audience members may have never been backstage at Disneyland, but
Hmm.
it's really tight. So to
Yeah.
get from one place to another, we walked through Town Square, right at the train station
Hmm.
was on our left, and Main Street was on our right, and we were, kind of pushing through the crowd to get across. Well, at the moment that we were in the center of Main Street, the lights changed, the announcement voice came on, the music came up, and all the Snoke machines came on at that moment. And it was such a magical moment that all of us, jaded, Imagineers,
Yeah.
stopped right there in our tracks, jaws opened,
Yeah.
goosebumps hitting every one of us. And it was just a moment. You've seen it 1,000 times. Many people in our group were there, had programmed all of the audio and everything.
Sure.
And it's still just landed in such a beautiful way.
Yeah, yeah. Disneyland backstage is very tight. I've been back there. Adventure by Disney is very tight.
Yeah, Theron, Theron, did you know? I don't think we didn't have a chance to talk. Did you know that Tony's a former cast member?
I did not know that, so thank you for telling me.
Sure.
That makes it even more magical.
Yeah, he was in security at Epcot, right, Tony?
Yeah, that was my
Awesome.
base post. Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah, I think my audience is tired of hearing me talk about that.
I'm not.
They might be.
Once a cast member, always a cast member.
That's correct.
And I'll tell you, Theron has taught me, and I've seen it myself, right? We always see it. Cast members are just as much a part of the experience, if not the biggest part.
Yeah.
I think I was telling Tony that we were just at Epcot today. We literally rushed home to get on the podcast. We were at Epcot, and we were with a family member who was in a scooter. Mm-hmm. And one of the custodians came up to her and said, "Oh my gosh," and handed her, because she saw that it was her birthday, mm-hmm. her 70th birthday, handed her a bunch of stickers and said, "Oh my gosh, this is so exciting." She said, "When the fireworks are on tonight, they are for you."
Right.
Little moment.
Sure.
Yes, you recruit them. Yes, you train them. Yes, they're supposed to do that. But you know how easy it is for somebody not to do that.
Sure.
Little moment that can change not just a day but a trip.
Yeah.
So I'm a huge believer in my wife and I what cast members can do.
I remember during my training, but someone had said, "You really can't have a bad day. You may be having a bad day, but you can't bring that on stage because this is somebody's first time, their lifetime trip. This is so you can't. You always have to be on, and you have to be, kind and cordial and courteous, and because this is it for them. They may not see this again, So even though you're having a bad day, you just got to put it in the back of your head, push it down, and just go out and make magic and make it happen. Make the guests, feel special. Like this is, oh my God, you're the only one. So, that stuck with me. That was all the way back in the 90s, So
that's amazing. I don't know if your audience knows this. I'll just throw this out for giggles in case, but your audience may not know this. Imagineers are not trained the same way that cast members are. So when an Imagineer has to go into the park, we're required to remove our name tag and our badge. Because you could imagine somebody with, a large earring or tattoos on their face or some crazy thing because Imagineers, don't have to meet grooming standards.
Right.
Being asked by somebody, where's the bathroom? And these people don't know. I mean, it could really wreck a guest experience. So I don't know if you had ever explained that to your audience before.
I don't think I knew that. I don't think.
Oh, not allowed. But it's weird because when there's so many construction projects, right? Epcot is a great example. Mm-hmm. This happened to me at Disney Springs. You have all the different construction fences up, and oftentimes you have to walk through guest areas to get to the different parts of the construction site. You don't like to do that, and we work hard not to because we don't want to interfere. With the guest experience. So we take a little extra time. We remove our hard hats and our vests and everything. We tuck them, tight, and then we put our hard hats under our arms and we walk, to try to keep a low profile. Right. But oftentimes happens is that people will see that hard hat and call you out and they'll want an autograph or they'll want to talk to you. And so, we try to keep a low profile. Yeah. That's all Imagineers work hard to do that.
I wonder if Bob Iger ever gets asked where the bathrooms are when he walks around because he doesn't take off his name tag.
Tony,
there or they might be over there. I'm not sure. You got a 50-50 shot. Take a stab.
True.
Something very important in what Theron just said. Think about this, all right? Like, I have every picture on my Amazon Echo, and I don't get I don't get money from Amazon for saying that.
Right.
Every other picture is from our kids growing up at Disney World, right?
Yeah.
Our towels in our kitchen have Mickey on them.
Mm-hmm.
Our silverware has Mickey on them.
Mm-hmm.
When is the last time you got excited about, your refrigerator brand?
Mm-hmm.
Do you have pictures of yourself at the manufacturing plant with your refrigerator brand?
Exactly.
If you were there, would you be excited to not? I'm not saying refrigerators are important,
Yeah.
but would you be excited to go up and meet the people who designed your refrigerator?
Right. Right.
But people, I told you, it's like myself. You're excited to meet an Imagineer,
Right.
because it's like, wow, you guys do magic.
Yeah.
You're like magicians. And to me, I always say it's the tagline for my How Does Disney Do That in the beginning was, what would it be like to walk through a park with Walt?
Yeah.
And I always considered Imagineers to be Walt stand-in.
Right. Right.
So it just shows you there's just something about Disney,
There's only well, I'll start with this. You're right. Because I did a long time ago lunch with an Imagineer because all right, if I could sit down with an Imagineer and have lunch, yes, please. And it was fantastic.
Yeah.
We had a great time only because it was me and my mother and one other couple. Now it was for 12 people, but there was only 4 of us. So it was like
Wow.
exclusive access to this woman. And she didn't even get a chance to eat her lunch, which I felt bad because we were just like back and forth questions. But she was the Imagineer, interior designer of the Animal Kingdom, and then she also did Cinderella Castle Suite. And I'm like, okay, great.
Wow.
Can we go there? Can we take a look? And she's like, yeah. No. So,
I don't have a secret pass.
she doesn't. But a couple months later, D23 had an event, and I got to go up there, and I was like, oh, now I can see this woman's work that she poured over this beautiful Cinderella Castle Suite. So I was lucky that I had the lunch and then got to see it, and it just happened to be a coincidence.
That's so amazing.
Yeah.
I have to say, Tony, as a part of that program, because there was only like 14 of us here in Orlando that did that. I don't know if they do that in Anaheim, but they hosted at the Disney Hollywood studio at the Brown Derby in a little really cool room called the Bamboo Room, actually, that my team designed once upon a million years ago. But it was a really great program, and I know all of the Imagineers that when I was there that did that program. Loved meeting with the guests. You just come away feeling, 10 feet tall. I felt like I could leap over buildings, and because let's face it, the reality is the work is really difficult.
Yeah.
And I mean, you're building impossible things,
Right.
floating mountains and flying ships, and so to meet with your audience that loves what you do, wow, you came away just feeling, completely magical.
Yeah, I'm sure. And it's almost like having your own little private research group, right? You can ask them questions, right? What would you think if
Right.
we did this? Not saying that we are, but if we did, what would that look like for you? I mean, it could be your own little research group.
Get myself in trouble.
Well, you got to keep it,
The question we got the most.
Yeah. Go ahead.
How can my son or daughter work at Imagineering?
Oh yeah, I bet.
That's the big one.
Yeah, that's a good question. But I also think at the studios, the Imagineer thing, it probably would have been like working in the fishbowl where all the animators were creating the movies while people were had their heads pressed up against the glass, kind of. But we didn't. I always wish that there was like a 2-way microphone, like you could have gone to a box and hey, can you tell me how that would have been great. Like they can, hey, I'll just answer your question real quick. But I don't know. Probably
Real quick times 10,000 people a day. I'm trying to animate Tarzan here.
Well, maybe have hours only between 12 and 2. We'll answer questions while they're at lunch.
I love it.
So what do you think? This is a question for the both of you. You can answer. What do you think Disney in the future, future thinking Disney, what do you think is the next big thing that is going to try and make that emotional. I know they're coming up with a bunch of stuff in Disney World that's coming, and even Disneyland. Bob's spending that 60 million or $1 billion. I forgot what letter he's using.
How many zeros?
Yeah, how many? To enhance the parks. But how do they continue to do this, right? But go ahead.
What do you say, James? From a fan's perspective, I mean, I think that's important perspective.
You mean, how can they continue to do this? How do they continue to?
Yeah,
yeah. What's the future?
Stars, villains, Avengers. A new Indiana Jones ride. Something.
You know what? I'm going to probably answer in a way that you might not expect, and it's something that goes back to what Theron and I have talked about, which is how strong the experience is, but how fragile it is at the same time. And that if you take away something that people love, you could maybe take away a few things. But if you take away too many things, it can start to unravel the magic. And so for me, I was actually talking to my wife. We were walking past Test Track, and they are renovating it.
Right.
Here's a wacky idea, and we've got a former Imagineer on with us, so it's the first time he's going to hear this idea. And here's this wacky idea I had. What have they ever gone back to a previous version of an attraction? Like Test Track, for example, the original version, we loved, my kids loved, and everything. And Test Track, 2.0, it had some really cool stuff in it. We just didn't have that same connection with it. Maelstrom, Maelstrom is one of our favorite rides ever. The Magical Express, right? I think is at Disney World. It was a critical part of the dream. You get it from the airport.
Right.
You're right into your Disney vision. So yes, I mean, I think there's probably obviously huge new technologies. All these different things they can do. What I would counsel Disney, if I could sit down with Bob Iger, I'd say, watch out for the basic stuff, the stuff that most matters.
Don't forget where you started.
Yeah. Like, I'll let Theron take this, because if you look at the cover of the book, it goes back to the logo that Theron designed for How Does Disney Do That. If you look at the cover of the book, it's a starburst, all right? And it's very reminiscent. I'll let him talk more about the logo, but because he was, is it the word echoing back? No, that's not the right word, but hearkening back to this golden age of Disney that I think is very important and I think it's something that if Walt were here, Walt would say, don't ever get rid of Spaceship Earth. Sometimes you don't have to change everything. So, Theron, what do you think about all that?
Well, I was just going to say, Tony, for the future, I think that the world needs Disney. I think that it's very, very important. There's really no other brand like it. And the original brand mission of Disney, I think, is really, really important. I do think, and what I'm saying is not politically motivated at all in the sense, but as culture changes and priorities change within cultures and companies adapt or not to those changes, sometimes they either get closer to their original vision and mission that was set out, and sometimes they depart from that somewhat. And depending on how the audiences feel about it, is the success or not within a particular business. So it doesn't matter if that's a gas station, but it certainly does matter if it's a media company like Disney. So that would be my thing. Is I think that Disney needs to exist in the world, but I think that they can't go too far away from their original heart of what it's about, and that's connecting with people in an emotional way. Pursuing the revenue too closely and in an obvious way that it affects the experiences that are made, and this is true for any company, it really becomes a negative thing. So I think the future of Disney should be really bright. And if I was sitting in Santa Claus's lap, since we're very close to the season, what my request of Santa Claus would be is, please create more original IP.
Yes.
Stop just flowing the existing IP. I know that it's very good for Wall Street, and I know that it's very good for whoever's sitting in the CFO and the chairman seat because it's low risk, but it fatigues the life out of the IP. And, Walt showed us, right, with Pirates and the Lone Ranger and, those were things that were created, Haunted Mansion, IP that didn't exist that was created. So that would be my wish if I had it.
Yeah. And there was an interview probably last year that Bob had mentioned there was going to be less IP or less repetitive IP in the parks and put new IP in the park. And we still haven't seen that yet. I don't know what his plan is. He didn't mention that part, but so
you don't have a weekly meeting with him where he goes over there?
I've tried, but he keeps denying the meeting.
Doggone it. We got to work on that.
It's funny. I had reached out to Michael Eisner through his management team, and I wanted to have him on the podcast to just talk about his experience. And the answer I got back was he would love to, but he had an agreement with Bob to not talk about Disney while Bob was still the CEO. And every time Bob extended I was like, oh, please just leave so I can get Eisner on the...
Michael's not stupid.
Yeah. I'm like, oh,
wow.
And now he's back again. I'm like, oh, that was my window. I had a short window with Chapek, and I couldn't.
That's great.
So I'm working on it. Just to wrap up, tell everybody where they can find you guys on the internet, where they can find the book, what's new, I know, Theron, you have something that you want to talk about, but so where can everybody find you? What's the best place to get in touch with you if they want to find out more or share their story?
Yeah, so working right now on a workbook that'll
we can't hear you, James.
Okay, I was just testing you. I was actually doing testing of the mute system there. Sorry about that. Working on a workbook right now for How Does Disney Do That? That'll accompany it, because Theron and I are going to be going out and doing presentations for organizations, et cetera, on how to apply these principles to what they do and how to apply it in your own life. So, but also working on the second book in the series, which will be focused on cast members, Imagineers, and other Disney leaders. So that's working out. That's keeping me busy right now, very much so. And we're always looking for stories. Yeah. It's obviously the key, right?
Yeah.
The key to all this is stories. So if people want to share their story for any of the books coming in the series, they can go to howdoesdisneydothat.com. And on the website, they'll find a number of things. They'll find where to submit their story. They'll find how to connect to our two groups, one on Facebook, one on LinkedIn. They're growing. They'll be able to see events that we'll be at. I'm going to be on I've created a new webinar series called Disney Authors Roundtable.
Yep.
So we'll be on next Wednesday, or I don't know when this is going to actually be live. This podcast.
20th was the date. I thought I saw it.
Yeah, it's 11:20 at 4:00 Eastern. So they can find information there too, and they can get the book at Amazon, at Rivershore Press. It's been carried in a number of Barnes and Nobles now. So yeah, so exciting stuff, and you can connect with me through the website,
Hmm.
and I'll let Theron talk about how you can connect with him, and also let him share his exciting news.
Cool.
Excellent. Well, thanks. This is the first podcast platform, Tony, that I'm able to share this. I just
Awesome.
announced excitedly last week on Tuesday that my book is available for pre-order. And so I wrote a book called Creating Memorable Worlds, a
Mm.
journey into themed experience design. And the basic idea with the book was to represent my 30 plus years in the industry and to represent the processes, the foundations, the people, everything that you need to know to work in the industry. And it's over 300 pages, so I'm pretty excited to get that into the hands of fans, students, and professionals alike. So we started pre-ordering, and the response has been quite amazing. I'm very, very excited about it. James and I have the same publisher, Barry Hill at Rivershore Press. Amazing team. The books will be available in spring. So really excited about that. You can audience and anybody that listens to your podcast could go to creatingmemorableworlds.com for more information or to pre-order. And if anybody's interested in connecting with me, probably the best place is LinkedIn. I have a personal page there as well as a business page for my my boutique firm, which is called the Designers Creative Studio.
Okay.
But I'd love to connect with people.
Yeah. We'll have to have you back on, talk about the book.
And
Fantastic. That'd
Yeah.
be wonderful.
Yeah. Get some.
and Tony, with the cool thing about Theron's book is, just like with my book, so surprised by how strong of a response we've received from the themed industry.
Mm.
Now, a lot of that's due to Theron, and that's his network. And but for them, they're getting a chance to see how fans are reacting to their work.
Right.
Mhm.
That's the holy grail, right? But Theron's book,
So
I believe fans will love Theron's book too,
Yeah.
because it's like me talking to him for 3 years now. It's like, wow, in my book, I have a story my wife shared. She said, going to Disney for her is like when we have guests at our house.
Mm.
She prepares for those guests like 2 weeks ahead of time. She gets their favorite soap, their favorite food, the right candle, you know, because, and then when they get here, they feel like someone cares about them.
Right.
That's how it is with these, experienced designers.
Yeah. Sure.
And so I think people will really enjoy. I think fans will enjoy reading Theron's book.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we all do because we want to take a peek behind the curtain.
Yeah.
See how the stuff is done.
right.
For some
What
people, that ruins the magic. For others, it does not. It depends on the person, right? But I think everybody wants.
that's
to,
right.
they
Well,
want-
we seek to. I try to answer the question how do so many people ask, how do I work in the industry? You have the coolest job. What can I do? How can I work in it? And literally, the book is, you could read it asynchronously, but if you read it synchronously, it literally builds on itself. It starts with the industry and goes all the way through. In fact, the last chapter is called The Story of You. And the whole idea is, how do we leverage everything that you've learned in the book, identify your own passions and, what's your calling, what do you feel wired to do,
Yeah.
and teach you how to navigate your own career path into the industry that you just learned about. So I really hope that it inspires, it educates, it guides. That's my vision, is that it really helps people either understand more or understand how to work in the industry.
Yeah, that's perfect. Awesome.
Hey, Tony, I'd be remiss if I didn't add one piece about how does Disney do that, which is that we are partnered very closely with a charity partner,
Okay.
which is Give Kids the World
Right.
Village. They're based in Kissimmee, and this is before I moved down to Florida. I didn't really know about them, and that's why I also want to help spread the word about them so much. They were founded by a Holocaust survivor who was good friends with the Mercury astronauts, Walter Cronkite, and he was a hotelier. He owned a Holiday Inn that was right on the outskirts of Disney World. and he would get calls from from families whose critically ill children wanted to go to Disney, and they'd say, could they stay at your hotel? And he'd say, of course. And one time, he'd arranged it all. One time they had a young girl who was going to stay there, but before he could make it happen, she passed away. So he said, never again is that going to happen. He goes, a child is not going to miss that because we can't get it together that quickly. Sure. So he went to Disney World. He went to Universal. He went to SeaWorld. He went to Perkins. And they all became founding members of Give Kids the World. And so he bought property in Kissimmee. And if you go there, which is truly amazing, I don't know if you've ever seen it,
Yeah, I've been
Tony. Okay, then you know.
Yeah.
It's like a mini Magic Kingdom.
Sure.
And they give free vacations, free week-long vacations for critically ill children and their families. Yeah. A portion of the proceeds of How Does Disney Do That goes to them. Okay. We have a fundraiser with them, and I wanted to make sure I never want to get off one of these interviews without mentioning them, because when I toured Give Kids the World, there was a moment where I felt that same sense of wonder that I was at a loss for word, and I had a lump in my throat that I had on Flight of Passage that day. It's like there's something very special going on here, and some very special people making this experience happen. Yeah. So, thanks.
And a majority of it happens through volunteers, which is
yeah. Oh,
really nice.
Yeah.
And it's the one place there. They have a really cool building there. It's an ice cream shop, Starlight Scoops. And I was told it's the only building that the Imagineers and that Universal, the designers from Universal and the Imagineers worked on together.
That's cool.
And kids can get ice cream 24 hours a day, and their favorite thing to do is get ice cream 24 hours a day.
Yeah, and why not?
Yeah, why not?
Yeah. Hey, thank you both for coming on. I truly appreciate your time. Great conversation, and you have to go check out the book. You got to go read it, and now get the workbook, and then figure it out for yourselves, and work through the process, right? So,
thanks for doing this, Tony. Really appreciate it.
All right.
Thank you, Tony.
Yep.
Good times.
The Disney Parks Podcast is not affiliated with the Walt Disney Company. All Disney parks, attractions, lands, shows, event names, etc. are registered trademarks of the Walt Disney Company.